This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Easthampton City Council Finance Committee budget hearing. This is our first budget hearing. Tonight, we are going to be going over revenue, general government, and CPA. This is my first time doing a budget hearing, so if I get anything wrong, please feel free to correct me, and I ask for your patience. All right, first, do we have no minutes to approve? Okay. Mayor's communication. Mayor, would you like to start off? Okay. Public speak. I don't think there's any public here, unless any city employees want to talk about something that isn't the budget. Oh, unknown raise a hand. Unknown, would you like to, here I can. Oh, here I've got another person. Yes, I've got a person here that just says unknown to me. I see your hand is raised. Would you like to speak?
Yes. My name is Kathy Wazinski. I live on Oakland Drive. I would ask. I'm going to turn down my volume a little bit. It's not as echoey. I would ask the city or finance committee review very carefully the budget, focus on what is needed in the budget, what we need to move the city forward and keep it stable, like water and sewer, police and fire department, and disregard and pull out anything that is not necessary. Our road right, not needed for the city to function. It is superfluous funding, and as nice as it might be, it is not needed for the city to function. We have sewer systems that are outdated and have been ignored for far too long. And I would ask that more money be allocated to that, and many of us will watch the budget process fairly closely. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Anybody else? Okay, great. Just as one quick note, for anyone tuning in later to watch this, or for folks who are here right now, the city council doesn't individually have the ability to reallocate money. We can cut money, and then it's sort of back in the mayor's court to see where that goes, or if the mayor chooses not to do anything with it, it just becomes free cash. But we're not in a position of saying too little here, too much here. But certainly if we see anything that's seen as wasteful or superfluous in the budget, we would certainly have a conversation about that. Okay, so with that, I think we can jump into the budget, and we're going to start with revenue. You know what? I'm doing this all wrong. I should do. Make these both full screen, and then I can share the other screen. That's the better way to do it. So share budget, share. Here's our budget. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's not good. Yeah. This is a little bit different than
you used
15.
to have the whatchamacallit on the side.
Yep, I see them now. This is a slightly different setup than my home computer, so again, please bear with me. Okay. And great. Yeah, okay. I got it working now, I think. Okay, sweet. So yeah, first thing on the agenda is revenue. Mayor or Hadel or somebody, would you like to just give us a summary of what we're looking at this year for revenue?
So, I mean, the revenue calculation is basically a best guesstimate based on prior years, with the collections of property tax and also various local receipts. Net cherry sheet. We start with the revenue of the governor's budget, which is back in January. So always kind of a reminder to folks is, one, not only are we starting with a budget that was put together in January, there's the House budget and the Senate budget after that. They're not all the same, and we don't know where we're going to end up. The other is that we've our estimates for revenue for this current year, we're missing the last quarter. So what you're seeing in revenue is what we've actually brought in plus the last 3 years. The last 3 months of the year is an estimate. This is very similar to expense, where you're seeing expenditures that reflect 75% of this year, and then based on estimate this year. Major changes for the coming year include sewer and water rates, getting on track with what we have to spend on them in the enterprise account, as well as the raising of several fees and permits that have not been raised in the recent future. So I'll say that in the very top level and then defer to our auditor, who can talk us through the actual revenue and how we got the numbers before you.
Oh.
So the revenue estimates are categorized under 5 categories. First is local aid, offsets and assessments, which is all state revenue. Local receipts is what we collect in licenses, fees, any of the other local operating from the departments. The next one is the tax, which is the standard from the state calculation. We take prior year levy limit, add 2.5% to that, add new growth, deduct overlay, and then debt exclusion, because we have override for 2 schools. We add that back in there, and that gives us the tax levy for this year, which would be the collection from the taxes. And then there is enterprise revenue, CPA, self-funding, and other financing sources. So enterprise revenue is because enterprise is self-supported. Enterprise is self-supported. The budget is covered for enterprise through their own revenues along with the indirect cost. CPA is another one which is self-supported. Other financing sources includes this particular year. It includes sale of lot revenue, parking receipts, cannabis stabilization, general stabilization, and tax rate stabilization. At the end of the revenue budget, every dollar for the expenditure has to have every dollar match in the revenue. That's called the balanced budget. So it adds up to the total expenditure budget.
Okay, great. Just so that I understand, when these this column is the percent of total, that's the percent of each subcategory, right? Like, so the local aid is as a percent of the net cherry sheet.
Budget, I think
Uh,
so. I don't know. I
Oh,
can't speak to this.
all right, yeah, that's what it looks like to me. It's fine. Okay. So I guess my first question would be, is there anything here that's you would say is strongly different from what you've seen, and that's a departure from what we've experienced over the last few years? I know that the last few years have been erratic with COVID and whatever, but is there anything here that we should be aware of that's sort of a new situation?
I mean, the thing that might pop out to folks at home and in the room is when you look at the increase of revenue to the increase in expense, there's a gap. We're this is not unexpected. It might look odd when you're talking about raising every dollar for revenue and vice versa. And this is the conundrum that we've planned for, where we knew we would have a year where ARPA and ESSER money would tail out, and we would bring the rest of our ESSER, ARPA expenditures into the general fund. That was appropriate. Not everything we did, over ARPA, or even ESSER, like those positions. I'm sorry, ARPA is money, federal money that came right to the cities because of COVID, post-COVID. ESSER is the same kind of money that went to the schools.
Right.
So not everybody was, kept on board. There were a lot of consultants who came on and off. What you're seeing the difference of the gap, and as we get into the departments, are what we thought were essential services that we needed to continue. You'll notice the increase in the enterprise budget and that revenue that we're hoping to achieve, very conservatively estimated, because we do have a lot of work to do on and sewer, wastewater, and water as far as federal permitting. But yeah, you take a look at this and you're like, okay, there's a gap. And we were ready for that. With the generosity and the understanding of council, I went back to you guys several times to say, hey, I'm putting more money into stabilization. And we've got, some record highs. But when you look at this page, I'll end with it's a false positive. It looks, pretty amazing. And it's not. We're paying forward this year for almost 2 years, like in the future, based on expected revenues going up. And it's a conservative approach. We're not rolling the dice, but I don't want, there will be no increase in this budget. I would, at this amount, in the any time near future. This is kind of the end of the rollout of ARPA and keeping those expenditures where they need to be, but also the revenue now will become, we think, a little more regular.
Okay.
So anything else?
I would only mention this too, as we are using $1.8 million out of general stabilization. That's the one-time money. So next year, along with the budget, we have to also keep in mind that this money is covered or adjusted. So fiscal year 2026, either we do level funding or kind of use backwards approach. Start with the revenue and then go with expenditure. 2026 is going to definitely look different.
Right.
Yeah. So, so the idea was in fiscal year 25, this one-time money was, you look back at how much we put into general stabilization, capital stabilization. It was extraordinarily high. We didn't know what this year would look like. We knew that, there was going to be a gap, and that we felt good that we could cover it. But it truly is like, all else goes sideways in the coming year. Easthampton will not have the option to go back into general stabilization to fill that gap. Like, this is truly one time, and there will be very difficult choices to make if something really goes sideways. We don't collect revenue or whatnot, and we're we're prepared for that. We feel good about where we are and what we've projected. And the council will hear more as we get, into the summer meetings, just as far as in fall, to see what we've actually collected this last 3 months, and we're watching very carefully.
Right. Did I see your hand, Councilor Terrell? No. Okay, you're just. Sure, go for it.
We also increased the revenue from fees and so what's going to happen when I do the budget, I have to go by the actuals or estimates for 2024 in order to prepare 2025 budget. Revenue budget gets finalized when we do tax rate recap sometime in November. So what's going to happen is this 1.8, it seems too high, but it will be adjusted with the increase in the revenue, and then the net is going to go on to 2026, if that makes sense.
It sort of does. I think I get it. And I, for what's worth, I was here for the last few years, so I have a recollection of us having these conversations about, making sure that we fortify our stabilization because we don't know what the next few years are going to look like. We explored some different possibilities of things that could happen. And I feel like what's actually happened is maybe probably on the better end of those options. We were talking about potentially like a, global economic collapse, and we didn't have that. So not in the sense that we were thinking of in any case. But what we have found ourselves in is a situation, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure that I understand this, where there were a handful of positions that since 2020 we've brought into the city and funded with either ARPA or ESSER money, both of those being funds that came from the federal government as a result of COVID. Some of those positions are playing roles that at this time in the city, we're not looking to terminate those people. We're looking to continue, whether it's those people or somebody else, we're looking to have somebody continue to fill that role within the city government. And I know that just from my conversations with folks on the school committee, with ESSER, so much of that money is around sort of, emotional support for kids, and just with everything that is, just anyone who's talked to the schools will say that how critical those services are for just all of the stuff that's going on right now with all that. So I have no problem with taking money that we could by all rights have just spent a couple of years ago, and yet we instead chose to save. I have no problem at all taking that money we saved and spending it now in order to make sure that we can have a more an easier, less bumpy transition towards incorporating those positions into the budget. That I have no trouble with. I guess my one question, and I feel like I have a sort of an understanding of your team's position on this, even if I don't fully necessarily see. At least I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But just for the benefit of the public, I guess what I'm wondering is, it feels like virtually every year we have a substantial surplus from into free cash, and this year's, my understanding is quite substantial. And so wouldn't there be an argument that you could make that rather than moving money out of stabilization, we could be maybe just saying that if we're getting multi-million dollar surpluses every year, then doesn't that sort of mean that maybe we should be like looking at whether we're not correct, we're not correctly estimating our revenue estimates, and should be maybe finding some ways to revise our revenue estimates upward rather than moving money out of stabilization. I just want to, this is a question I get from constituents from time to time. So I just,
and what you described is definitely a fiscal approach to a budget in general, but especially school and municipal budgets. And the approach that I've taken over the last 5 years has been, money saved can be money used in the future. But also each department budget, as we go through it, if there's any really a strong chance for variance or unknown expense, say overtime. So police overtime, fire overtime have always, since I've been mayor, it starts at I think it was 150, we did 140 maybe this year, because we know that definitely we're coming back for appropriation, but we don't know how much. My approach to that would be, let's keep that money then aside into our regular stabilization, our free cash, earn some interest, and encourage the department heads to be wise with the use of their budget. But also it allows us to be nimble when something may happen and we need to fill a gap, or quite honestly, we settle a collective bargaining agreement, and you will, I don't think we have any on the city side. I'll budget for exactly what I know the budget amount is, and then come back to city council, in the summer or in the fall after, and say, okay, this is what we had for fiscal year 25. we've settled the contract, and now the first year difference, we're going to fund out of free cash or general stabilization. So the idea is to, as much as we can, which is in buckets, cash flow, to keep moving, and also to collect interest. I take the approach of I want it in the bank, the municipal bank, and then come back for appropriations. I also think that it's a great sunshine tool. While it certainly adds to the work of everyone, but I don't know if the intricacies and the intricacies of municipal government make a huge assumption that the public, who are some department heads or some mayors, know basic accounting and then apply hundreds of years of municipal ordinances on top of state and whatnot. So it's not at all clear. One thing you can do is you can keep your budget, your general operating budget, very tight. The appropriation comes, and that's an opportunity for everybody to comment and figure out what's going on. And that there is a vote by the city council. Money comes, the request from, there's a vote on city council to take a look at what's being appropriated, and it doesn't make sense. We sign off on every one of our department budgets. The department heads do, and so do I. So the council at the final budget, it's not like, well, you thought, no, it's right in our budget book. We signed off, and we are ready to answer those questions of, you said this line would be $100,000 and now you're asking for 20 more. What's the difference in making the argument? But, to your point around forecasting, I would love to have a great forecasting model. We hope to move that. I mean, it's been a goal since I took office. One, I guess I could, put in the COVID bucket, but really it's a practice and a capacity issue we did not have in City Hall for the first 2 years I was in City Hall. We did get a grant to do some forecasting, but it's not at the point, honestly, that I feel comfortable jumping into it and making expense decisions on, and rather kind of hold the money tight and then go for a lot of appropriations. And it's not because we don't know what we're doing with the money, but legal is a great one. Like, are we spending more legal money than what's requested? Are we? We are. Some of it will be covered by grants, and some of it, will come out of specific, like if it's a tax taking or whatnot. So I purposely, I peg it at a reasonable amount, and I know we have a lot of easements to go through this year with all the projects in town, and that'll be legal, and we don't have those exact figures. So we're going to bank the money until we get some detail, and I'll be seeing you throughout the year. Respectfully asking.
Well,
Taylor, you have anything? I
can add some to this. So if we look at the history from at least average last 3 to 4 years, we received CARES and FEMA and ARPA money, which was one-time money with uncertainty. Rules were changing probably every time we turn around, rules are changing. ARPA is the same story. CARES FEMA was the same story. What we needed to do to operate is budgeted, but when money came, take the advantage of it and charge it to the right places and free up the money in the general fund. So what resulted is the high free cash. All 3 years, I have 3 years data here. Mayor approved tax rate stabilization, 2023, 150 grants, 400,000 in 24, and this year we are using 600,000. And then we also put a lot of money into general stabilization and capital stabilization when free cash was approved. We also reviewed in June, I think it was only happened in once, I think then last year it didn't happen, year before. We had extra money at the end before June 30th because free cash is a one-time money. It expires on June 30th. We put that money into the stabilization account. If we are able to use $1.8 million to support 2025 budget from general stabilization, it's because of those free cash money was put into the stabilization. If we would have not put in that money into stabilization, our balances would have not been higher.
Right.
So in a way, if we see it's like a constant, as needed, we were putting money in a small chunk, like this is the 2025 would be the year where we have to put big chunk, and we didn't hesitate. Mayor approved it, and it's 1.8 and 600,000 is going in. 1.8 million and 600,000 is going to support the budget instead of making tough decisions this year.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of information. Thank you very much. I think that the big takeaway from this is that we have I would argue, exceptionally conservative. I might even argue slightly too conservative way of estimating the revenue that we're going to be bringing in. And so I feel like in a normal situation, we're sitting here as a finance committee. My job would be to second guess you, being like, oh, are you juicing these numbers? You know, are you fluffing these up a little bit, right? But I think that that's the opposite of what is probably happening here, where every budget I've ever looked at, our revenue has come in over that. And so this isn't a deeply scientific approach, but just having done this enough times, I'm not overly worried about our ability to raise this money, simply because I've been here for 8 years, and we've exceeded our number every time.
If you look at the DLS dashboard, which I think we included, and you compare it to other communities, and our forecasting is very conservative, and I would not argue with your statement, Chair, around maybe too conservative. The past practice, or just say, and not practice, but the sense of the community is to do exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that 25 and 26 are going to be really interesting numbers, because our rates, the permits and revenue should be up, our local receipts should be up, and we'll get a good sense of what it looks like going forward.
Right.
I would say too that in defense of keeping it low, we have huge local matches to meet in like key infrastructure projects. So if a road gets done over, if we get like money for housing, we have matches between 5 and 25%. And that comes out, and it's a careful balance. I guess I don't disagree with you at all. I don't think we have the capacity and tools right now internally to be able to increase those revenues, or like the projections, and feel like we have a handle on the budget.
Well, I'm certainly not asking you to do so right now in budget season. I do think it's something when we're talking about this, and I know there are people watching, people who are going to watch
Yes.
later. I do think it's a context that when we start talking about these numbers, we need to bring up this. There is a historical performance here. There's a way that we've been doing this that precedes your administration, but it is a little bit. My understanding is it's a bit unusual, and it does lead to these situations where it sometimes things feel very bare bones when they're not, or things feel very flush when they're not. And so I just think it's important that we sort of establish that we've got kind of the way we're looking at this is all kind of. I have no further questions on revenue. Do my colleagues have any questions?
You spoke about what I was interested in.
Can I add one more?
Absolutely.
Free cash is going to go down now, because one time CARES FEMA is gone. One time ARPA, we are supposed to have all the obligations in place by December 31st of 2024.
Yes.
That means if any position is funded through ARPA, we have to shift all of those positions in 2025, the second half of the fiscal year. So those revenues are going to go away. And if we are maintaining the level services, then those expenditures needs to be put onto the budget. So with that said, budget is going to get higher, one-time money is going down, so free cash is going to go down. And actually it already started this year, so you'll see the trend going down.
Right. Yes, that's another really good point. Okay. The next thing we have is general government, right? You have the page number for that by any chance, Connie? Just because you had the last one. Oh, here.
37.
So,
Yeah. 30, yeah, 37. Revenue section.
okay.
Page 14. I think it's page 34.
34.
Yeah, it starts at 34. And the first thing up is city council. Waste of money as far as I'm concerned.
Can you put that in the minutes?
Yeah.
Already written down.
All right,
All
gotcha.
right.
15.
I saw our President Gomez here, but I think he had to hop out. Well, we've been over this as a city council pretty extensively, so I'm prepared to move forward if you are. But yeah, not a whole lot of major changes. Okay. So the next thing up is mayor and city attorney.
I'm sorry. Yes. I lost my, like, looking at the correct one number just, and I was like, wait, this isn't, she's like, no. Page 38. Yeah, so, city attorney, again, we talked a little bit about it. In city attorney, we have an appointed city attorney, Mark Tanner from Bacon Wilson. It's a yearly appointment. Within that firm, Bacon and Wilson, through Mark, we access a whole bunch of different kinds of legal needs and support. And then we have another attorney that is just for labor, that works with us on budgets and whatnot. So this amount, we keep it pretty reasonable and because we don't know what we're going to need as far as easements or labor agreements. If we go to mediation, if there maybe is another claim or whatnot against the city that we'll have to defend that's outside of insurance. So I keep that tight and we see how the year goes. And as needed, come back to city council. We are getting better and better on asking for and figuring out grant applications for legal expense. So we're relying on the general fund. I wouldn't say less and less, but for a lot of these big projects, then we can take them out of grant. Mayor's office is an example of where we are as far as a position that we didn't, that was helpful during COVID and doing different things. And the reality is coming out of COVID and whatnot, it's not a position we really needed. It was very helpful when we had that staff, but it's not something that the mayor, it's not that we have to.
Which position is that?
It's a part-time clerical.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So we didn't fund. So that's when you look at education and training, similar to other departments, up that amount was a really big part of what we learned over COVID is keeping now all the new rules and opportunities with grants and whatnot. That's been, that's something we're invested in and it's gone nicely. The in-state travel is what you would think it is as far as in-state travel. The dues and membership are mostly the Massachusetts Municipal Association. And just what those yearly dues are, and then advertising as needed.
Okay. Okay, any questions from my colleagues? All right. Seems fairly stable. Okay. How about licensing?
I still have an ethics opinion outstanding.
Okay, that's right. I have not made any changes to licensing since I have come on to the
Right.
department.
Pretty minimal.
It's very minimal. And at one point, pre-COVID, I was traveling to Eastern Mass for conferences for licensing. And the Municipal Licensing Corporation has since been disbanded. And that is no longer. However, I wanted to keep this minimal buffer in there because there has been talks about the Cannabis Control Commission passing along licensing to municipalities as well.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so keeping that as a little bit of a buffer in there in case there's any education or training opportunities during that time frame.
I just have a quick question. So the education and training, is that for you or is that for the members of the?
It would be for whoever is in the role for the licensing department. So currently myself, yes.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the members of the licensing board?
No,
Training, okay.
it wouldn't. The ABCC does offer free trainings quarterly for any new members, which I do send out to board appointees. But there's nothing offered at this time.
I'm just asking for a friend.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we can probably afford this one.
Yep.
All right. So the next up is our assessor.
There's the principal assessor, and there was a change in the admin assistant salary because prior to my arrival in July of 23, the office was being manned pretty much solely by our admin assistant. So she was given more hours and I believe higher pay, or just the more hours brought her up. So we brought her back down to her standard hours. And so that's why there's that change. Assessor stipends is our Board of Assessors at $75 for the 3 members a month. And we took on also at the beginning of August a data collector who's 20 hours a week. And that's been a huge help to our office. It leaves me to be in the office, and he will go out and do inspections for building permits, cyclical inspections, which is required by the state once every 5 years. So that's been extremely valuable. Our education and training, we are back on, for the most part, with in-person training. They have them either through the MAAO, which is the Mass Association of Accredited Assessors, Mass Accredited Assessors. It's something.
Association.
Yes, and that's also to dues and membership, and the Hampden Hampshire County Assessors Association. So they offer things throughout the state, and once a year in August, they had courses at UMass, which is a week long. They've changed it to Southbridge, so that will require more mileage. I believe highly in professional development and like to attend as much as I can. A lot changes with Mass General laws, especially with solar, and Easthampton has a lot of unique projects that require training, and brings us to our professional and tech services, which is our consultant who aids in our revaluation, which used to be every 3 years. Now it's every 5 years. And that helps, he helps us with our utility valuation, which is quite intricate. He will assist us in ATB cases, which we have a few pending, and does our personal property inspections. Books and periodicals, I will be due to take my ethics, which is offered through the Appraisal Institute. That requires a book. Travel, as I mentioned, with my education and training. And this is also not just mine, this is for my part-time clerical, where it applies to him, and the admin assistant. and dues and membership, which I covered in the education and training for those two organizations, which I've actually would like to join the International Assessors Association because they seem to be covering a lot more classes than the MAO. But that came up after the budget came out, so let's figure that out.
Okay.
Thank you for this. Appreciate it. Do you think this budget is fair to you?
Well, you never know. I mean, we're talking, the fiscal year hasn't even started and I have no idea what kind of classes will come up, but I would have to say yes.
No, yeah, and you don't feel like there's anything that you are missing or anything like that, that this is a fair budget for you to be able to move forward for the next year? Yes, yeah, perfect, yes, thank you.
Okay. Any questions,
Well,
Council?
the only question I had was about the admin assistant salary differential, but you covered that, so I do not have anything.
Next up, we have our auditor.
I am a department of two-person, myself, as city auditor, Kathy, who is assistant city auditor. I am asking for a part-time person in my office to do some more legwork so I can do some shifting around where I can move some more work onto her, and the part-time person is going to do more of like day-to-day filing away or entering purchase orders and the basic thing. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that audit department is asking for a part-time person. So subject to approval, effective date is going to be July 1st once it's approved. The expenditure side is pretty straightforward. Education training, I go to Mass Auditor and Accountants Association. We have March school. I attend fall conference and annual June conference. Fall conference is in Devens. That's where the in-state travel is coming from. June conferences it's at Cape. March school is at UMass, but because I'm also the secretary of the Audit Association at the state level, it is mandatory for me to stay at the premise because of the role I have, but they cover majority of the cost. Dues and membership has to do with mine and assistant auditors membership for the association. I also put money into the MGFOA membership too. I haven't used it last year because I knew that my plate was full. It doesn't make sense for me to pay $60 to them and not attend any of the programs they're offering. But I'm looking forward to use up in fiscal year 2025. Financial audit and audit guest fee 68, that has to do with the full city audit, which also includes the single audit for the school grants and everything. The estimate for this year came as 39 grants. Portion of this is going to be covered from ARPA funding because ARPA allows us to use anything, any cost related with ARPA audits can be charged to the ARPA revenue account or ARPA grant account. So that's not included in there, but that's the audit for the whole city.
Okay. And you think that with the ARPA and these funds will be good to cover that?
Yes, we don't have, I think it goes by the transaction and it's hard to tell external auditors upfront that, yeah, I'm going to charge X amount in fiscal year 2026 when I come to do the audit for 2025. It's like a year and a half, almost 2 years from now.
Sure.
So he just gives us an estimate. It's like per transaction it's going to be, and then he makes the adjustment. It's like a plus and all.
Okay, great. Yes.
Couple questions. One, so the part-time clerk, I just want to be clear for the public. In part, that has to do with the fact that your work in the city of the work is expanding and thus needing more work to kind of keep on track of finances and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
They're getting so many grants now.
Right.
And a lot of capital projects, and the requirements are changing rapidly. Like this particular, like CARES, FEMA, ARPA, that's gonna go, but at the same time, we're getting into this opioid business and all the capital projects, it's a lot, so.
Right. Yeah, so I just wanted to be clear that it's not just,
I'm not
you have
asking.
a
you
lot
to
going
go-
on. Yeah, right?
There's
You're
a lot
not looking to
going
take a
on.
break, right? You got a lot going on. I just want the community to be clear about that. The other question, same question. Is this a fair budget to you, do you think?
Yes, it is.
Are there things you wish you had or didn't have or kind of unnecessary or?
No, it's, everything is calculation based, so everything is like, if you look at the payroll side is like with the step and grades which we are in place, so it's standard. It's not something like we're adding, out of nowhere. Education, training and all that, I do have a benefit because the travel I do for the association is covered by them, so it's not on the city. Like Devon's conference is fully sponsored by the association because I'm a board member. So that is not part of this, but let's say if somebody else takes over this position, that's not that I'm leaving, but if ever that happens, then you'll see that there will be an increase in that budget. But for now, I think it's a fair budget.
One quick question, just, it's not a huge amount of money, so I'm not overly worried about it one way or another, but do you anticipate, having, a part-time person going forward in future years, or is this sort of just to get caught up on some stuff that's happening right now? Because that's how you made it sort of sound at first. So I just want to make sure I understand, like.
So it all depends who gets into that position. So maybe like Kathy, who's the assistant city auditor, she didn't mention that down the road she's going to retire in like next 3 or 5 years. And if the part-time person is there and wants to step up and has credentials or have enough time in the office and would like to get more education, and we can kind of start on that position or a cross-training in timely manner, and it would be productive. But it all depends who comes in. Somebody might not just come to become a full-time person, or somebody might come as like, okay, I strictly want to stay as where I am.
But do you think that next year you if barring retirements or anything else, you'd want to keep a part-time person next year as well, just to keep that sort of support? Okay, yeah. Well, I've seen you here at some insane hours, so I'm in support of that idea.
Right.
Okay. This all looks fine to me. Any questions? No? Okay. I've been asking, by the way, my colleagues, like, any questions, but if anyone else here has a perspective or a thing they want to interject, like, feel free to just raise your hand.
I'll just say on auditing and the part-time clerk, the department heads make their own budget. I mean, I don't really mess with them a lot. They know what they need way more than I do. On the part-time clerk, I'm glad to see the auditor added it. I don't see the need going away. I think it was a lot different during coming out of COVID, and during COVID, there were so many, it would have been like we talked about more staff and whatnot, and it was just going so fast. It would be more work to bring somebody on and train them up. And I think that this position, it'll be interesting when you're talking about a forecasting model and whatnot. Our state has great tools for that, but the auditor still has to have time to do it.
And I'm strongly in support of that.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, I don't see how this position goes away. It's
Right.
That leads me to this question. Is 11,000 enough for that position, do you think?
I did not know, because it first of all, it's subject to approval that yes, go ahead, audit department can hire a part-time person because it's an addition. When the process starts, we don't know which kind of applicants we are getting. So what's going to happen is, if this money is not enough, then in 25, I'll be coming back to city council asking for more money, and then that will set the fiscal year 26 budget. So there might be a jump from 11 to 15 or, yeah, it all depends. I don't know that.
I do sort of just wonder about that. Just given how tight the labor market is, how many people are out there looking for part-time work. So if that's something that really becomes a struggle and we're in the middle of the fiscal year, I guess we can, cross that bridge when we get there.
We would absolutely come back. Thank
Yeah.
you, Chair Peak, for bringing that up.
I sometimes am on hiring committees in my day job, so I am kind of aware of what.
You get how it works.
Yeah, no,
He was hinting at,
Okay. Let's see. Treasurer and central purchasing is up next.
So salaries, like Peter said, they're by the pay plan. The only thing new there is the stipend for certification and certified treasurer from the Mass Collector Treasurers Association. And City Council was nice enough to pass that section. The difference in the lower, like education and training and in-state travel, in the previous years, most of the in-state travel and education was coming out of one line. So this, I just sort of split into what it was. Fatal has a sheet that she does that has all of her meetings that she goes to, all the education and everything. So I did the same thing to make sure that I was putting in the right amount for myself, for the assistant. I have for the procurement officers recertification. We have a meeting in the fall and the spring, UMass school in the summer, and a conference at the Cape in June. Dues and membership are for the local Mass Collector Treasurers and the state Collector Treasurers. I also pay dues, actually under professional services, not really dues, membership to their bank to check on the bank status to make sure that all of the banks are doing what they're supposed to be doing and that they're not in danger of any failures. Valley Green shredding for all of our shredding, and our public official bonds that is actually under insurance, but
Okay. And so with are we, do we outsource the payroll processing? Is that
We
why it's in
do,
the
yep.
expenses? Okay. I think I knew that, but I forgot about it. So, no, I mean, it doesn't look like there's anything new here and everything seems to be increasing by pretty reasonable amounts. Does anybody have any questions? I feel like this is always maybe the easiest part of the budget because so much of general government is just like salaries that are on pay plans. So there's not actually a tremendous amount to discuss, but I still want to be diligent.
So same question. Do you think this is a fair budget for your office? Yep.
Anything else? Okay, now we've got procurement.
Yes, how are you? Procurement budget is pretty much the same. The biggest jump it saw was FY 23 to FY 24 when there was, FY 23 to 23, when there was a 3% increase. This year I'm looking at a 1.78% increase, another $615 to this year's bottom line. This budget is essentially used for bulk paper purchases, office supplies, and postage expense for the postage machine, all focused out of this building, 50 Payson Avenue. I don't buy office supplies for the police department or public safety. I do buy office supplies for Council on Aging. I think this budget is realistic. I do have some concerns because there's simply more human beings working in this building than there was about 7 years ago when I started, about 7, 8 years ago. We've seen growth in the planning department, additional bodies, the health department, and the assessor's office. I'm also seeing a larger demand for mail costs. And the assessor has done some specialized mailing this year related to reevaluations, I believe. That's putting a little burden on the postal machine line item. We'll also see postage costs increase as they do every year.
Sure.
overall, I think it's a realistic budget. It will be tight, as it always is in this budget, but I expect this will be adequate.
Okay, great.
Just a follow-up question. So you say you have concerns, right? So moving forward, can you, like, what does that concern look like?
Well, the concern right now is, today is the 29th of April, and I have zero funds left in my office budget and the procurement office supply budget right now. So that means that the month of May and the month of June, no one's getting anything.
And that has to do with the increase in employees. And
Yeah, it's, it's the increase in employees. It's this strange economy that we're in
Yep.
right now with, even though I purchased the majority of our office supplies from WB Mason, which is a state bid list,
Mhm.
prices are a lot lower than what you would see.
Mhm.
Just going on WB Mason and looking at the cost of an item, I get all the state bid list prices.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
you were answering it. So
Yeah.
what were those concerns?
Factors going into this additional persons, this strange economy where,
Yep.
where, inflation is
Mhm.
affecting everyone,
Yep.
it's affecting the city. And, just a larger demand for postal costs, postal service, out of this postal machine. As an example, the Council on Aging will reimburse that machine for their postal costs. Whoever uses that machine as a city department will save 2 cents on every first class mail. Because because everything's done electronically, the postal service gives us a $2 discount. So that's helpful. We're just seeing more demand for mailing.
Good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Next up is technology.
She should be here.
I'm gonna just run a check. You guys wanna move on to maybe Emily?
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. Okay.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
See you later.
I mean, I can talk through it.
Where's human resources? Let's do that.
So not a lot of changes this year. So we have obviously myself and Kira, my assistant. We also have under professional services, we have a contracted employee who comes in 1 day a week to do our benefits. So she'll do all our enrollments and everything. And it's really a steal because it's about $9,000 to have another part-time employee. And she has a lot of great resources. We've really loved working with her. I do anticipate somewhere down the line that we would have to actually have another employee because I don't think she's going to be with us forever, or I anticipate those costs to rise. So not this fiscal year, but in future years. So we also have under professional services, we also do custom drug testing, which they do all our random drug tests for DPW, and they also do clearinghouse for their driver's license for their CDLs. So we contract with them. It's a pretty cheap service, about $300 for the year. As far as advertising, we keep our costs pretty low with that because we use a lot of free resources. We use the free Indeed, which is fairly successful. We've done a lot of listservs, so those have been really beneficial to us. And then a lot of times what we can do is certain positions that are grant funded, we can reach into the grant to pay for those advertisements. So we do most of our advertisements through that, or if we do fund advertising, usually it's through the Mass Municipal Association. Education and training usually involves the MMHR, so the Mass Municipal Human Resources Association. I go to their annual conference. I try to go to the MMA conference every year if I can. And we do have some local human resource things. And then I was fortunate enough to be part of a policy committee for personnel and labor relations. So I'm really excited to be able to do that and go out to Boston and be part of that as well. That is also included with the travel because a lot of those things tend to be out towards Boston or on the Cape. And then every year or every other year, we do an actuarial study, which is other post-employment benefits that I think is mandated to do every 2 years. So we did it this year And this coming fiscal year is going to be an off year. So every year we just put the $100 as a placeholder to keep the account open. And then we'll do the next study the next year.
I see. So without the actuarial study, this budget's actually decreased.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Super. Any questions? Sorry.
Same question. Yeah. Realistic, fair budget to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I always love a good training and the mayor knows that.
Yeah.
But I've also been looking into other resources if I have grant opportunities for different trainings and stuff like that. How can I get other funding? So obviously I would always love to dump more into my education or Kira's education or anything, but I think it is completely fair and reasonable.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Any questions, Council? City clerk.
Barb has a conflicting schedule for tonight, so she
Sure.
also has another meeting happening for, I think, Manhattan, so.
Okay. Well, we could come back to this at another meeting. It looks like there's a couple that folks aren't here for, so unless Mayor, you'd feel comfortable speaking to the ones where
I
folks aren't here.
feel comfortable speaking and to the general budget and some questions I can
Mhm.
probably answer until it gets into the details, but this is, pretty much a very tight budget as far as what the city clerk does. She is extremely efficient. I would remind people too that this is just the city clerk. I think people think about, oh, and these are elections as well. That's a separate department. We're not seeing any change in the personnel that are coming in. We don't have any records projects going on. We would pull that out, and that would be separately, like as a budget line item. We've had a lot of questions about, public records and whatnot. So, they're not,
Yeah. I don't see a lot of major changes.
For the public, can you just explain longevity?
Yeah, so due to the time that both the clerk and the assistant clerk have been here, we have a longevity policy in place. They've both been here a long time, and of course, we want to retain employees, and that's where that's coming from.
Great, just want to make sure people understand that.
Any questions?
I'd ask you if you thought it was fair, but I think you're going to say yes.
I would. This department is run so very well and tight. What I would say about this is, but if not for city clerk who has worked here, I think 39 years, and a clerk who has been here for a while, when said clerk retires, that bottom line budget is going to change a lot, and not just because of salary, but because of just being new to the position. And sure. I mean, this is a department we know, somewhat like technology, where you see these skyrocketing. This year it is. I think it's a fair budget, but next year and the year after and going forward, it's going to look different and more.
Okay. Then elections and registrations.
What I would say on this budget, this is really, it's a very well put together projections of what we think will happen with elections, but things over the last few years have changed a lot. Early voting, mail-in registration. There are years where we do not get reimbursement from the state or the federal government. And there are some that we do because if it's the state election, and so they'll reimburse us on this. So Barbara, this would be a great set of questions to get the details from her. But there is a lot up in the air in this department that we are dependent on the state, and how many elections will be coming up in a year. How many people, how many ballots are requested to be mailed out aren't necessarily the number of ballots that come in, the tabulation for that, and whatnot. It's a little more fluid than it ever has been, but I think we came back this year for a little bit of an appropriation, and Barbara put together a reasonable budget, but there are a lot of variables in this department.
Sure.
That are out of our control.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Any questions?
Quick question. Sorry, you might have said this. I got momentarily distracted. The election and other positions, it jumped. Is there another position that's being paid for, or that's just someone?
It's an increase. Yeah, it's an increase of positions we need,
Okay,
given
okay.
the mail-in ballots and whatnot, and counting those.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that that's where that was
Yeah.
falling. The part-time election workers. Okay.
Yeah, plus this is a presidential.
I was just gonna say, especially with it being a
Okay.
presidential election year, I think it's definitely.
Yep, there we go.
Counselor? Um,
CPA is the next one.
we went over to, we skipped technology and collections. Mind just going over those real quick?
No problem.
Let's start with technology.
I mean, so when you see the top line, in 22, it's $75,000. And then we're building it out to 2025. On personnel expenses due to, we've never had an IT department. And it's kind of a crazy thing to say, but the woman who becomes our IT director started during COVID and really worked for nothing. I don't know, $30 an hour.
Of her heart.
Yeah, blessing her heart. And we had to build the position and backwards, and we had ARPA money. This is a great example of we could use ARPA money to get the position up to speed while we built it out, adding, in a computer tech. So this is really a budget timeline that is funded by ARPA. And then as we got a handle on all of it, we took technology expenses and related expenses out of the individual departments and put them all in here. So, when you see, the radios, telephones, and other, that's the city's basic budget for that. It's all consolidated in here so we can leverage the amount and get better prices for our stuff, but also for maintenance, making sure the software, this is really tied into cybersecurity. You can have all the cybersecurity programs and gadgets and whatnot in place, but if someone doesn't update their phone and there's a security, fix in that, it all goes for naught. So this is, it's a lot for the department to take on. They're really getting their arms around it. Our other departments have been really open to this system. I think they learn a lot as well. I would also note on this is the department that probably gets the most money that goes into the actual operation of the department. So planning and fire, they get large, different kinds of grants that, like to do a feasibility study, for instance. Right. This is, our technology department has, gotten $250,000 here and there that doesn't show up to do fiber and to do redundant connection, fiber connection between all of our city buildings and whatnot. So that pays for it, but you'll see, the salaries are supported by the operational budget.
Right. Okay. There's some pretty large increases here that I'd like to hear the details on before, not that I'm against them. I understand your narrative. I would agree with, and I would say that broadly, I'm pleased with the way that we are building out like an actual IT department, because so many of the ideas I've had in my time in government of things that the answer is like, we just don't have the capacity to do, you know, oh, here's this technology that would allow us to do this cool thing. And it's like, yeah, we can't do that. So, I'm glad that we're doing that, but I'd like to,
Sure.
whenever, I should talk to Corinne and figure out.
I would, right, I mean, I could give a general overview, but to really understand what this department is knitting together and why the increases and where, and while there've been healthy, you know, I'm looking at the software yearly maintenance. That,
I'd just like to understand more what
she
that
can
is.
break it down. And we have the cybersecurity grants that we have gotten has just opened our eyes to a whole, it's Swiss cheese. And these costs, you know, it's really fascinating, interest to just hear how they built it and what the long-term cost will be to the city.
Yeah, it's a comment, not a question. I'm actually really pleased with the consolidation into one office. I think the amount of security breaches that could happen when this department is responsible for it, or that department is responsible for it, or that department, right? So to be able to consolidate that all under one office with a group of people who are experts kind of in that field, I think only makes the city more safe. And we've seen countless cities, schools, whatever, be taken over by and kind of held hostage. And so I think that this is incredibly important. And then as a result of that, we'll also see other budgets and other departments go down because that cost is then shifting here and it's all under one. So I would hope from that there would be some savings as well. So it's not this department, that department, but like all under one kind of umbrella.
Absolutely. I mean, for all of those reasons, and when you see increases in other budgets, it's kind of hard. You know, you look, it's like, well, you consolidated, so why isn't, and the increases you would see in another budget is inflation and things cost more, and we're tucking away here. You know, if Karen was here and you asked her if it's a fair budget, I think she'd struggle to say yes. You know, we could triple it and still be lacking, and that's just the reality. And they do a great job with grants, but this, like, the clerk's department, as we really get into this and figure out what we have and we don't, this is a department that is just going to go up, and we haven't really touched equipment. You know, laptops and whatnot, we'll get it, but there's other equipment we use that has never been replaced.
Sure.
And we couldn't even replace it because it doesn't work anymore.
So I'll be sure to ask her if it's fair.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So I'll email Karen, see if there's a day that she might be able to stop in, and I can just amend our agenda for that day. Because I just have a couple questions about this.
I just wanted to ask the finance committee and the mayor, if you want departments that are not present for meetings to come back on final vote night to have these discussions so the public can be a part of them, or did you want?
I guess final vote night would be a fine time to do it. That makes enough sense. If that day wasn't unavailable for her, I would be okay with her dropping in on. We'll just may have another meeting go slightly longer.
Okay.
Whatever works best for her, I guess we can be flexible with them.
That's a fair question. I mean, I think the public being a part of it would be helpful.
But one way or another, I can amend the agenda to make sure that people know what we're going to be discussing that day, one way or another.
Whatever preferences.
Okay. Collector.
Yeah, so again, pretty straightforward budget as far as no big surprises, no big additions. There is, you know, the increase you see, I would note postage, you know, big uptick, not surprised at that, but I will actually start up top, tax collector in the salaries, my apologies. This is a fantastic example of where we were with salaries and where we need to be. And, you know, again, hats off to the city council for repeatedly not only increasing the salaries, but also a healthy step. So I really feel like this department shows like where we need to be And this is also a great example of funding forward. So asking for a bigger increase this year across, when we see the 9.5% across all of it, one of it is to peg these numbers as high as we can, as much as they deserve. And they don't get paid enough. I mean, I don't think anybody, it's just impossible for that. So this is a really great example of that in the salary. When you look down into advertising and you can see that bumping down, we also, when you see negative, when you don't see anything, this was taken, these figures actual to date are from January and matched to the governor's budget. So it's not that won't be expended. The other I'd say is there are a couple of bills in the legislature right now that would change the requirements for advertising in an actual paper and online. So that might, be changing, but we need to plan on using a newspaper, and it's really expensive. The other notes, the office supplies aren't consolidated. It's a special form that goes out that you use for your tax bills. So it's why you don't see it under procurement. We have pushed this department in the last few years to really attend professional development conferences and opportunities. It wasn't department historically that was budgeted for that, but as you can see, we've done that.
Great. Okay. Now, is that it, or is planning part of general government too?
Playing part of general
Okay,
government.
so we're still doing general government. Okay. We don't have a planner at the moment, so
we're darn close. So the planning department has gone, we've done different things over the last several fiscal years around increasing and changing positions. Here, what you will, note is that we're really pushing to keep all of our conservation agent, keeping that full time. We've added an assistant planner who is on board and is training up to take on things like the planning board and writing those conditions. We just had with the Tasty Top decision, I don't know, 20 some odd conditions all have to be written, with conjunction of the planning board that meets Mass General Law, that's legal review, it goes back and forth, those sort of things. And so to have that extra hands-on in that department is really big. And a lot of our bigger grants, even though they would seem more like another department, like a DPW grant, it all starts in the planner department. And that's how the state and federal government mostly have it. If you're going to do an infrastructure project and the planner is the one, this ties it to, this is our downtown study, and they run a lot of that. And then it comes more technical. If you were to, and I'm not saying it all mocking. So if you were to ask the planner, regardless if it was the last one, the new one or whatnot, if this is a fair budget, I think this is a budget where we get what we pay for. And there's a lot of other, I shouldn't say a lot, there's a fair amount of money that comes from grants, CPA money, wetlands, delineation, and it augments the work out of this department. Again, this would be another department over the next 5 years that will still slowly creep up as that money changes. But also we have major, sustainability issues that we're starting and green energy that we're starting to look at. And what we've learned in planning is we're really good at getting grants and managing green, clean, whatever kind of energy you want to call it. We don't have somebody who's doing that. Everybody's doing a little part of it, and planning does green communities and monitors that. And we've been lucky so far that everyone in planning can take a little piece of it, but those days are ending. And we're increase and we're hoping to offset that with additional clean energy sources in our utilities, as well as switching around to offset like with fees and the permitting around this, and solar's so technical and so time consuming and whatnot. We'll need somebody to really oversee that and be in one place.
Okay. Any questions, councilors? Yeah, and it feels like it's mostly payroll and.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like it.
No. And again, there are several sources that offset the expenses where we are purposely pulling in different sources, and zoning incentive funds too, which when we get affordable units, we get a certain amount of money back from the state, like an incentive.
Yeah, smart
and that,
growth, all that.
right, and that goes to the planning department. So.
Okay. Building operations is part of this, but we talk about it when we talk to DPW, so skip that. And that's the end of general government. So CPA is the one last thing. Okay. Do you by any chance know the CPA page?
At the end, towards the end.
CPA.
110.
I know it's like way down there.
Oops. Oops. And this thing scrolls different, the opposite way of mine, so I'm sorry for that. Oh, he's one. Oh, so 111. Okay. Well, CPA.
So
I'm on CPA, so I can speak a little bit to this, although I've been to only 2 meetings, and we haven't had any money to appropriate. But you know, this budget is fairly standard. It's, you know, we have the money that comes in that's forecasted based on the state budget. There's a certain amount set aside for open space, for historical preservation, for affordable housing each time. So those are actually they're down just a little bit. Just we're trying to figure out what some of that's going to look like. Sorry.
No, I mean, we have come to, CPA with projects and then to city council, where we have assertively expended in the thing that we said we would, especially around open space and affordable housing. So this was a big year for our asks, and thank you very much for approving those. That said, from the state budget and revenues, we're looking at a decrease. We're forecasting a decrease because of what's going on the state level. In past, the state has come back in a supplemental budget with additional money, different amount, percent. There doesn't seem to be an appetite for that right now, but we're really in the, we're in the beginning stages of the House and the Senate budget. So maybe we'll see something, but Jamie Webb, who oversees CPA, really felt uncomfortable making that assumption that the state would come back with a higher match or additional funds. So that's how we landed at the 804.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so one of the consequences of this, for the last few years, we've been setting aside $250,000 a year for the Old Town Hall second floor construction. CPA voted this year, not to say that we're not going to send money towards that project, but to not set that money aside before even looking at what other needs might hit the CPA, because we highly expect that we will spend every single cent that we have this year. And so the general thought is it's a project and we would like to give it money, and let's look at it in the context of everything else rather than setting aside some money before we even see what everything else looks like. So it was a tough vote. Again, not saying that we want to make that clear. I'm probably not the person who should be the spokesperson for that particular vote, since I'm neither Jamie nor the chair, but that was a vote to just say, we know we're going to run out of money this year, so let's have everything on hand when the year starts, and then we're going to do everything we can to have that money go where it needs to go. But yeah, I don't think there's really a whole lot more to this, unless anyone has any questions.
A few questions, actually. So I just want to make sure I've heard comments in the community. So is the CPA, is that something that we have to have? No. Okay, great. So can you help me understand the benefit of having this and not just having a budget that just is for the general fund that could be used for whatever we wanted to use it for in the city?
CPA in Easthampton is a game changer. When you're looking at the open space, what we've been able, like the view shed of Mount Tom, and being able to purchase property on the side of Mount Tom so there aren't houses or whatnot, that was because of CPA. And the money there to take on that. The open space, what you see in Mutter Field, ADA accessible, the East Street New Park ADA accessible was a part of CPA. And very interestingly, we've got the project on Main Street on the Southampton line, where we partnered with Kestrel Land Trust and helped acquire that land that will not only preserve over 30 acres of beautiful land, will also put onto the market another 120 affordable units, 100%, with access to for the public to access that open space, as well as help redoing an adjacent apartment building that last. Also, Treehouse, just a national model for foster care and adoption, but also just housing. CPA was the one that helped fund deep retrofit. So really our most disadvantaged population could just have a more energy efficient place to live. The historic preservation key for Old Town Hall, we would have no funds to support that renovation whatsoever. I think that folks are necessary money to preserve. I mean, Old Town Hall is it's the keystone, it's the capstone of our culture and also downtown economic development. If you start here at Needy's and you Cottage Union, you hit Main, there it is at the top, and then you go down Pleasant to the things. The one thing I'll say about the Old Town Hall project, which I'd like to just bring up, is it's an amazing project. It deserves to be funded. Sometimes people are kind of back and forth about why it's happening. And what I want to make sure people know is the city, Easthampton, owns that building. So it's not as if we, upgrading it would be something we would want to do anyways, and we would have to do. The fact that we have city space in there, bringing it up to usable space, but also overseeing that kind of a project it's hard to quantify the money, right? That you can't see spent. So that's a really great example of that. So it's, whatever the papers or whatnot say, what's hip and cool in Easthampton, there's a lot of, the pond, bike trail, Millside Park. They all have money in it from CPA, as well as a lot of studies like inventory of affordable housing and whatnot. So we know what footing we stand on. It's No, we don't have to have the CPA. We set the percent and we set it at 3%. And we honestly, financially overall, we have the bond rating we do because we have the CPA to invest in things that would not be a part of an operating fund for a city this size.
And it gets a match from the state. So
Yes.
there's
Yes.
money that comes in when we do it through the CPA. Like, sure, these sorts of things, we could absolutely just do them through just taking some of the taxes and setting them aside and doing these projects, but we'd have less money for it. So,
Yep.
it comes with some caveats and whatever, but I think we've done a pretty good job spending it. So that's my perspective anyway. Well, in any case, that's CPA. So I think that's everything we're supposed to go over tonight. I think we've got a lot of these ahead, so
Pace ourselves.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.